video will cover section 1.8 on absolute value. So to be able to work absolute value equations, you first need to understand what does it mean when we say absolute value. Now, a lot of you will say it always has to be positive, but then we want to know why does it always have to be positive. So if you look at the definition of absolute value, what it's asking for is what is the distance of a number from 0 on the number line. And because we're discussing distance can never be a negative value. Therefore, absolute value is never a negative value. All right, so to know that we're talking about absolute value, you will see these two parallel bars, and then what's in between them. We're wanting to know how far is this value from 0 on the number line. So if we come over here and we look at the absolute value of 2, I want to know how far is 2 from 0. So if I come over here on the number line to the number 2 and I count back to 0, it's 1, 2, a distance of 2 from 0. Now I want to know how far is negative 2 from 0, or what is the absolute value of negative 2. So if I come over here to negative 2 and I count back to 0, that'll be 1, 2. Negative 2 is also a distance of 2 from 0. So no matter if you're going forwards, backwards, going up, going down, drilling down into the ground, whatever the case may be, you can never go a negative distance. You're always going 2 feet, 3 feet, 100 feet, 1,000 feet, whatever the case may be. All right, so if you're thinking about how many numbers are the same distance from 0, all right, meaning if I pick a distance, a single distance, how many numbers have that same distance? So if I said how many numbers are a distance of 3 from 0, how many would be that far? And that would be 2 numbers, negative 3 and positive 3. Or if I said how many numbers are a distance of 5 from 0, there would be 2 of them, negative 5 and positive 5 are the same distance from 0. So really this question, I want to know there are always 2 numbers that are the same distance from 0. That's not the number 2, but there are always 2 numbers that are the same distance. 2 and negative 2, negative 3 and 3, negative 4 and 4, negative 5 and 5, so on and so forth. All right, so when you're solving an absolute value equation, all right, there are 2 possibilities of what could lead you to the given distance. So when I look at this equation here, this says there is some number that is a distance of 7 from 0. So when I take the absolute value here, I find that the distance is 7. All right, so what I want to know is what x value can I plug in so that I get a 7 and a negative 7, because the absolute value of both of these is 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what's inside and solve for x. So what's going to make this inside be a 7, and what's going to make the inside be a negative 7? Because the absolute value of both of these is 7, or 7 and negative 7 are both a distance of 7 from 0. All right, so let's solve. We're going to subtract 9. Now when you solve these, you should solve them the same way. So I like to just go ahead and do everything at one time. So I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. 7 minus 9 is negative 2. And then over here I have negative 7 and negative 9 make negative 16. Then I'm going to divide them both by negative 4. So I just go ahead and do all of that at one time. The solving part should always be the same. So that leads me to x equals 1/2. Make sure you always write your fractions in their smallest form. And then here x equals 4. Alright, so then if you were to check your answer, you could fill it back in and come back up here and say 9 minus 4 times 1/2 equals 7. Then that would be 9 minus 2. And then we'd have the absolute value of 7 equals 7, which we know that is true. And then you could do the same thing by filling in a 4. 9 minus, I'll do it right here, 9 minus 4 times 4. So that would be 9 minus 16. And then that would be the absolute value of negative 7 equals 7. The absolute value of negative 7 is 7, which equals 7. All right, so notice how both of these answers, one gives me a negative 7 inside, one gives me a positive 7 inside, and then when I take the absolute value, I get a distance of 7. All right, let's look at the next. Here I have the absolute value of 3x plus 2 equals 5. So what this is saying is that the absolute value of whatever is in here is a distance of 5 from 0. Okay, well there are two numbers that are a distance of 5. So we're going to figure out what would make 3x plus 2 be a 5 and what will make 3x plus 2 be a negative 5. Alright, so I have two linear equations here. I'm going to solve them the same by subtracting 2 from both sides. Alright, remember at any time in these videos, if you need to pause it and catch up with my writing, perfectly fine if you do that. If you need to rewind it, perfectly fine. You don't have to go all the way through it one time without stopping. If you need to pause the video, please do that. If you need to rewind, please do that. Alright, so now we have 3x equals 3 and 3x equals negative 7. I'm going to come in and divide both sides by 3 on both equations. Make sure to write your fractions in their most simplest form. Alright, you should have two answers. Alright, if I fill in a 1, that leads me to a 5. And if I fill in negative 7/3, that leads me to a negative 5. So that when I take the absolute value of 5 and the absolute value of negative 5, for both of them I get a 5. Alright, let's look at the next one. Alright, this one says some number, alright, a distance of some number, take away 2 will give me 5. Well, I can't take this and solve it for 5 and negative 5 because 5 is not my distance. This says whatever my distance is, I took 2 away from it, and that's how I got 5. So what I need to do is add the 2 back on there so that I'll know what distance I'm needing to find. Alright, so 7 is the actual distance. Alright, so let's say that again. This is the distance. I took 2 away from it and got a 5. So before I can solve the equation, I have to know what the actual distance is that I took 2 away from. The way that I do that is I add the 2 back. So this is saying that 2x minus 1 is a distance of 7 from 0. So we're going to take 2x minus 1, solve it for 7. Alright, the other number that is a distance of 7 from 0 is negative 7. So I'm going to solve my two equations. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Alright, so I'm adding 1 and adding 1. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Alright, and if you need to write that step down, please write it down. Alright, I added 1, divided everything by 2, and I get 4 and negative 3. Then go back and verify that that works. So 2 times 4 is 8, minus 1 is 7. The absolute value of 7 is 7. I take 2 away from it, I get 5. Next I fill in a negative 3. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Minus 1 is negative 7. The absolute value of negative 7 is 7. I take 2 away and I get 5. Alright, for the last one here, alright, I have some distance, and when I add 6 to it, I get 2. So what I need to do is find out what is the distance that I'm adding 6 to get 2. So I'm going to take 6 away, and this tells me that the distance of some number is negative 4. Alright, now at this point you should pause and notice that the distance equals a negative number. Alright, and we said up here in the beginning of the video that distance can never be a negative value. Alright, so here when we took that 6 away, we got a negative number. Alright, there is no number that I can take the absolute value of and get a negative 4. There is no number that is a distance of negative 4 from 0. So this would be no solution. And you can either write the symbol, the circle with the slash through it, or you can write the words no solution. Whichever way you want to do it, you do not have to do both. Pick whichever one you like. All right, and that should kind of make sense to you that when you're finding the distance, it's always positive. So when you add to a positive number, you should not be getting smaller numbers, such as a 2. If I add 6 to something that's positive, if I add 6 to 0, 6 to 1, 6 to 2, 6 to 3, whatever, I'm never going to get a number smaller than 6. All right, so you might can look at the problem and just logically figure out that the answer would be no solution. But if not, work through it, isolate your absolute value so that you actually know what distance you're trying to find, and then see what you get. If it's a distance equals a positive number, you can continue on solving it twice. If distance equals a negative number, you cannot go any further. The answer would be no solution.